The helicopter detonated 50 meters above the tree line, its rotors disintegrating in a spectacular explosion that illuminated the Balkan Mountains like daylight. Staff Sergeant Adeline Parker experienced the force of the blast strike her torso as she threw herself behind the closest rock formation, with fragments falling around her location. The transmission reporting the downing of Viper 3 was abruptly terminated as the flaming debris spiraled downward into the ravine, carrying her means of escape and 4 fellow Rangers to their destruction. She attempted to contact the remaining 2 helicopters from the insertion group through her communications device, receiving only interference before a fragmented, distant voice responded. The lead pilot informed all ground personnel that they were experiencing sustained attacks from numerous surface-to-air missile installations and could not safely attempt retrieval, estimating a minimum 12-hour delay before extraction would be possible and wishing them fortune. Surveying her surroundings, Adeline found herself positioned at 11,000 feet elevation on a mountainous ridge in the disputed Balkans region, 15 kilometers beyond friendly territory in an area dominated by an irregular military force. Her 5-member Ranger unit had encountered hostile resistance during the landing operation, with 2 fatalities in the crashed aircraft and 2 additional casualties from the subsequent ground engagement, leaving her as the sole survivor. Her objective involved penetrating enemy defenses, identifying a priority target, coordinating systematic persecution operations, and designating his location for aerial bombardment. The target individual occupied a reinforced facility an additional 3 kilometers upslope at 13,000 feet elevation. Reaching this destination would require ascending sheer cliff faces that her deceased squad members had been transporting the necessary climbing apparatus to navigate. Her available resources consisted of her M4 carbine with 8 ammunition magazines, her handgun, 4 explosive grenades, and a communication device that might function if she could achieve greater elevation. What she lacked was specialized climbing gear, reinforcements, or any realistic prospect of survival. However, she possessed something her adversaries did not anticipate: specialized Army Ranger instruction and an unwavering determination to ensure her team's deaths carried significance. Below her position, she detected vehicles approaching as enemy units converged on the helicopter wreckage, conducting searches for any survivors. Above her location, the mountain surface rose like a barrier of stone and frozen water. Most military personnel would either capitulate or seek concealment, but Adeline commenced her ascent. The events of the subsequent 8 hours would demonstrate that the greatest threat on any battlefield is not armaments or numerical superiority, but rather a Ranger left with no alternative except to accomplish an impossible objective independently. Before detailing how she ascended a perpendicular mountain surface under hostile fire, neutralized an entire compound of combatants with restricted ammunition, and coordinated an aerial strike that altered the operation's trajectory, she would need to navigate the initial challenges. The operation had deteriorated from its inception, as intelligence assessments suggested the mountain installation was minimally protected with approximately 8 to 10 fighters, which proved inaccurate. When the 3 transport helicopters crossed the ridge at sunrise, they entered a predetermined killing zone where surface-to-air projectiles filled the atmosphere. The aircraft carrying Adeline sustained a direct impact, ejecting her from the explosion and causing her to land forcefully on the rocky incline, tumbling 20 meters downward before arresting her fall on a rock projection. Upon regaining awareness, she observed that both squad members who had also evacuated the aircraft were casualties. Martinez had impacted the rocks at a fatal angle with a severed spinal column, while Stevens had sustained shrapnel injuries from the detonation and expired before Adeline could provide assistance. The remaining helicopters had dispersed under intense fire, barely escaping over the adjacent ridge. At approximately 6:45 in the morning, Adeline was evaluating her tactical circumstances from behind a cluster of boulders 200 meters below the initial ambush location. Her available equipment included an M4A1 carbine with an advanced combat optical gun sight containing 8 magazines totaling 240 rounds, a Glock 19 sidearm with 3 magazines holding 45 rounds, 4 M67 fragmentation grenades, a combat blade, fundamental survival equipment, a communication device with restricted transmission distance, and medical provisions. Her challenges encompassed being 15 kilometers beyond friendly lines in the Balkan mountain range, having no available support for a minimum 12-hour period, enemy patrols converging on the crash location, requiring ascent of vertical rock surfaces without proper equipment, a mission target remaining 3 kilometers distant at higher elevation, and an enemy compound now maintaining heightened vigilance. Most military personnel would classify this operation as unachievable, but Adeline considered it routine.
You have to fight!
She verified her M4's functionality, confirmed her ammunition magazines, and began advancing upslope. The enemy would anticipate survivors attempting to descend and escape toward Allied territory, but she was ascending toward the objective because Rangers do not abandon operations simply due to challenging circumstances. The initial portion did not require technical climbing expertise, consisting of steep hiking through boulder fields and unstable scree. Adeline moved rapidly, utilizing terrain for protection while maintaining a low profile. Behind her location, she could detect the enemy patrol reaching the crash site, communicating in Serbian and fragmentary English. The irregular military force controlling this territory consisted of former military personnel and international combatants, well supplied with Serbian and Russian weaponry. At 11,400 feet elevation, the terrain transformed dramatically.
Come on!
The slope became a nearly perpendicular rock surface requiring ropes, harnesses, and protection devices that her deceased teammates had been transporting. Adeline studied the vertical face, noting 60 meters of exposed climbing before reaching the subsequent ledge system with minimal handholds and ice coverage in sections where one fall would result in death. She secured her M4 across her torso, adjusted her equipment, and commenced climbing without hesitation. Free soloing, the practice of climbing without protection, was something she had trained for during Ranger School's mountain phase, not extensively but sufficiently to comprehend the fundamental principles. Test every handhold, maintain 3 points of contact, trust your instruction, and control your fear. Her fingers located a crack in the rock and she pulled herself upward, executing one movement followed by another. The rock surface was frigid and her hands were rapidly becoming numb, but she continued advancing.
Come on. Breathe,
At 20
breathe,
feet
breathe.
elevation, then 30 feet, the ground receded below her, but she refrained from looking downward, as looking down was characteristic of individuals who doubted their capabilities. At 40 feet elevation, she detected voices below as the enemy patrol reached her position and observed her climbing, initiating gunfire. Alaska 47 projectiles struck the rock surrounding her location, with one passing so near she felt the pressure differential, but positioned 40 feet up a vertical surface, they would require exceptional marksmanship to strike a moving target at that angle and distance. She maintained her ascent. At 50 feet elevation, the firing ceased as they recognized they were expending ammunition ineffectively, but now they were pursuing her, audible as they began ascending the slope searching for an easier route to position themselves above her. Adeline reached the ledge at 60 feet elevation, pulled herself over the edge, and immediately established a defensive position.
Breathe, please,
The
breathe.
enemy
You have to
patrol of
fight.
4 fighters was traversing the slope below, attempting to outflank her location. She assumed a kneeling position, brought her M4 to her shoulder, and controlled her respiration. At this distance, with the advanced combat optical gunsight in her training, this presented minimal difficulty. Her first shot struck the lead fighter's center mass and he collapsed. The second shot eliminated the fighter behind him. The remaining 2 scattered, returning fire erratically. Adeline adjusted her position, tracking the third fighter as he dove for protection. When he emerged to shoot, she was prepared and eliminated him with 1 shot. The fourth fighter demonstrated greater tactical awareness, having located solid cover and not exposing himself. Adeline waited patiently, and after 2 minutes, he committed an error by shifting position to obtain a better angle, allowing her to fire 2 rounds through the gap in his cover.
Stay with me.
4
Come on.
adversaries
Breathe,
neutralized,
breathe, breathe.
but the
You have to
gunfire would
fight.
attract
Don't
additional
you
forces,
die on
so she
me.
continued her ascent. At 11,800 feet elevation, Adeline encountered the section that had required specialized climbing apparatus, a 100-meter vertical barrier of smooth rock with minimal features and ice covering the few handholds that existed. This was the section that should have been insurmountable without proper gear. She stood at the base, observing what appeared to be an unclimbable surface. Most individuals would retreat, but Adeline perceived a route, a thin crack system ascending the left side, barely visible and probably only a few centimeters in depth. Crack climbing without protection equipment was considered extremely dangerous even by expert climbers, as you wedged your fingers or hands into cracks and pulled yourself upward using pure strength and technique, with one slip resulting in a fatal fall. Adeline had trained for this during mountain warfare instruction, having free-climbed crack systems in Colorado, Washington, and Scotland during joint training exercises, learning to read rock and locate holds where others saw nothing. She commenced ascending the crack, with the initial section requiring hand jamming, wedging her hands into the crack and using the friction and pressure to support her weight. It was painful and brutal on the hands, requiring enormous grip strength, but Rangers possessed such strength. She pulled herself upward, one hand jam at a time, feet pressing against the smooth rock, finding tiny edges most people wouldn't perceive. 20 meters up the crack, then 30 meters, her hands were severely damaged with blood making the hold slippery, but she maintained her progress as there was no option to pause or rest, since stopping meant falling and falling meant mission failure. At 40 meters elevation, she detected helicopters as enemy aircraft circled the area conducting searches. One passed directly overhead, close enough for her to observe the door gunner scanning the slopes below, but he wasn't looking upward as nobody anticipated someone free climbing a vertical barrier under combat conditions. At 50 meters, the crack was narrowing, becoming more difficult to utilize. She transitioned to finger locks, wedging only her fingers into the crack and pulling her entire body weight with finger strength alone. This was the type of climbing that destroyed people's hands and that most climbers wouldn't attempt even with protection. Adeline executed it because the mission required it, and rangers do not quit because something is difficult. At 70 meters, she could perceive the top of the barrier 20 meters distant. Her forearms were burning with fatigue and her fingers were in agony, but she maintained her progress. At 90 meters, 10 meters from the summit, she detected voices directly above her as enemy fighters positioned at the top of the climb had discovered an easier route up the reverse side of the formation.
Stay with me!
She couldn't halt, couldn't retreat, could only ascend into whatever awaited. At 95 meters with 5 meters remaining to climb, she observed a boot appear over the edge as an enemy fighter looked downward, observing her and identifying her as American. An Alaska 47 muzzle appeared over the edge, pointing downward at her. Adeline executed something that would be instructed at Ranger School for years afterward. She released one hand from the crack, drew her Glock 19 from her thigh holster, and fired 4 rounds upward, all while suspended from just one hand jammed in a crack 95 meters above the ground. The enemy fighter fell backward and the Alaska 47 tumbled past Adeline as she holstered her pistol and continued climbing. She pulled herself over the top edge just as 2 additional fighters appeared. They were bringing their weapons to bear, but Adeline was already in motion, rolling over the edge and coming up with her M4 to fire controlled bursts.
Stay with me!
Both fighters collapsed, but there were more and she could hear them. An entire patrol of perhaps 8 to 10 fighters converging on her position at the top of the barrier. Adeline assessed the terrain in 2 seconds, recognizing she was on a narrow ledge with rock walls on 3 sides, a natural kill zone if she remained, while above her another 200 meters of steep terrain led to the next plateau, and below was the 100-meter drop she had just ascended. The enemy was approaching from the one open side. She removed 2 grenades from her vest, positioned them on the ground, pulled the pins while holding the safety levers, then grabbed a 3rd grenade, pulled the pin, and threw it toward the approaching enemy. She counted 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and the explosion reverberated across the mountain with screams and confusion. While the enemy was disoriented, Adeline released the safety levers on the 2 grenades at her feet and ran, sprinting up the steep slope above the ledge.
Stay with me!
Behind her, the 2 grenades detonated, triggering a rock slide on the unstable slope as tons of rock and debris cascaded down the mountain, burying the ledge and blocking the route behind her. The enemy patrol was cut off and would need to find another way up, which would require hours, while Adeline continued climbing toward her objective. At 12,400 feet elevation, Adeline located an observation position with clear views of the target compound. She was 600 meters distant, slightly below the compound's elevation. She removed her binoculars and assessed the target. The intelligence had been partially accurate regarding a fortified compound built into the mountainside, but what intelligence had failed to recognize was the magnitude. This wasn't a small outpost but rather a full military position with 20 to 30 visible fighters, heavy weapons including PKM machine guns and mortars, fortified bunkers built into the rock, multiple defensive positions, vehicle access via a mountain road on the far side, communications equipment including satellite systems, technical vehicles with mounted heavy weapons, and somewhere within that compound was the high-value target, the paramilitary commander coordinating ethnic cleansing operations that had killed hundreds of civilians in the valleys below. Adeline's mission was to mark the target for aerial strike, but with enemy air defenses active, no aircraft could approach, meaning she needed to destroy or suppress those air defenses first. She studied the compound through her binoculars, identifying the surface-to-air missile positions, 2 sites, both with shoulder-fired missiles, likely Russian-made systems. If she could eliminate those positions, aircraft could approach for the strike. 1 ranger against a fortified compound with 30 enemies presented odds that would have made most people quit, but Adeline commenced planning her assault. She noticed something else through her binoculars. A group of civilians, perhaps 20 people, held in cages near the eastern edge of the compound as prisoners, probably from the villages this paramilitary group had been terrorizing. Her mission parameters did not include civilian rescue, but leaving innocent people in cages while calling in an aerial strike wasn't something she could do, making the mission more complicated. Adeline moved into position 300 meters from the compound's eastern perimeter, the side facing the valley that had fewer defenders as they weren't expecting threats from the direction that required climbing vertical rock faces. She found a rocky outcrop that provided her cover and excellent sight lines into the compound, set up her M4 with the advanced combat optical gun sight, and began identifying priority targets. First priority was the surface-to-air missile positions, both visible with 2 fighters and missile systems at each. Second priority was the guards near the prisoner cages, with 4 fighters actively guarding the civilians.
Stay with me!
Third priority was communications,
Breathe.
having spotted the satellite equipment and radio antennas, as destroying those would prevent them from calling for reinforcements. Fourth priority was heavy weapons, as the PKM positions would be able to suppress her if she didn't neutralize them early. She had 8 magazines containing 240 rounds and needed to make every shot count. Adeline controlled her breathing, settled into her shooting position, and began the assault. Shots 1 and 2 eliminated the northern surface-to-air missile position's first fighter with center mass impacts. Shots 3 and 4 eliminated the second fighter at that position as he was reacting and bringing his weapon around, with 2 shots to the torso. The compound erupted in confusion as fighters scrambled, attempting to locate the threat, but Adeline was 300 meters distant, partially concealed, and they weren't expecting a single shooter. Shots 5 through 7 targeted the southern surface-to-air missile position's first fighter who was diving for cover, requiring her to lead him slightly with 1 shot fired, resulting in 2 hits and 1 miss. Shots 8 through 10 eliminated the southern position's second fighter who had made it to cover but exposed himself trying to reach the missile system. Both surface-to-air missile positions were eliminated and aircraft could now approach. Shots 11 through 13 targeted the guard tower near the prisoner cages where the guard was bringing a machine gun to bear on her position, with 3 rounds causing him to fall from the tower, but now the compound knew they were under attack. The PKM positions opened fire with heavy machine gun rounds destroying the rocks around Adeline's position. She dropped below her cover as hundreds of rounds tore through the air where she had been positioned, then low-crawled 20 meters to a new position and came up behind different rocks. The PKM gunners were still firing at her old position. Shots 14 through 17 eliminated the western PKM position, as the gunner was focused on her old location, allowing her to place 4 rounds into him and his assistant. Shots 18 through 21 targeted the eastern PKM position where these gunners had better situational awareness and were already swinging their weapon toward her new position, requiring her to fire faster and less precisely but effectively, with 4 rounds eliminating both gunners and neutralizing the heavy weapons. Return fire was intense now with AK-47s, a PKM she hadn't spotted, and even a mortar that started dropping rounds near her position. She was taking fire from multiple directions and was pinned down, but she had accomplished Phase 1 with surface-to-air missile sites eliminated and prisoner guards reduced. Time for Phase 2. Adeline pulled her last grenade and threw it toward a cluster of fighters who had advanced from the compound attempting to flank her position. The explosion scattered them, buying her seconds, and she broke cover and ran, not away from the compound but toward it. The aggressive movement caught the enemy by surprise as they expected her to retreat under fire, but she was charging their position. She covered 50 meters before they adjusted their fire with rounds cracking past her head and impacting at her feet, but she kept moving. At 250 meters from the compound, she dove into a depression that gave her cover from most angles, having cut the range in half. At this distance, her M4 with the advanced combat optical gun sight was devastatingly accurate, and she began systematically engaging targets. Fighters appearing in doorways received 2 shots each, a fighter on a rooftop received 3 shots, and a group trying to organize a counterattack received controlled bursts into the center of the group. She was through her 3rd magazine into her 4th, having expended 120 rounds with approximately 15 enemy fighters down, but more kept appearing as the compound had more defenders than intelligence had reported. An RPG whooshed toward her position and she rolled left as it impacted where she had been, with the explosion showering her with debris and leaving her ears ringing, but she kept fighting. Shots 60 through 65 targeted a technical vehicle with mounted machine gun being positioned to fire on her, and she emptied half a magazine into the gunner and the driver visible through the windshield, causing the technical to crash into a wall. Her radio crackled with the lead pilot stating that air defense was suppressed and they could provide close air support if she could mark the target, requesting authentication. Adeline keyed her radio while firing at an emerging enemy, authenticating with the designated code and informing them she was 250 meters east of the compound with surface-to-air missile sights down, but civilians in cages on the eastern perimeter, requesting they hold fire until she could extract them. The response was negative, stating the mission was to eliminate the high-value target and civilian rescue was not authorized. Adeline responded that she wasn't asking permission but telling them she was extracting civilians before they dropped ordnance, requesting 8 minutes and stating they could court-martial her when she returned, but she was not leaving civilians to die in an aerial strike before switching frequencies before they could argue further. Now she had to cover 250 meters of open ground, eliminate remaining defenders, free the prisoners, and get them clear of the strike zone in 8 minutes. Adeline checked her remaining ammunition with 3 magazines left, recognizing she would need to make them last. She sprinted toward the compound firing on the move, eliminating a fighter who appeared in a window with 2 rounds without breaking stride, and another fighter who emerged from behind a wall with smooth transition and continued running. At 100 meters, she pulled her Glock 19 and fired with her left hand while her right hand worked her M4 in ambidextrous shooting, engaging targets on both sides simultaneously, eliminating 2 fighters with her pistol and another with her rifle. At 50 meters, she was in the compound perimeter in close quarters battle mode, rapidly clearing rooms by slicing corners, checking angles, and engaging threats as they appeared. A fighter burst from a doorway and she placed 3 rounds into him before he could bring his weapon up. 2 fighters tried to ambush her from opposite sides and she dove forward into a roll, coming up firing in both directions with both going down. She reached the prisoner cages 25 meters from the eastern perimeter where 4 civilians were locked inside, huddled in fear. The cage locks were simple padlocks that she shot off with her Glock, then pulled the cage doors open, instructing them to run down the mountain as American forces were coming. They stared at her terrified, not understanding English, so she pointed down the slope using the Serbian she had learned for this mission, instructing them to flee and run, which they understood and did. However, 3 fighters had spotted her at the cages and were advancing with weapons up. Adeline had nowhere to hide as the cages offered no cover, so she stood her ground, brought her M4 up, and engaged. She hit the first fighter twice with center mass impacts. The second fighter was firing as he advanced with rounds sparking off the metal cages, and she felt one tug at her sleeve and another impact her plate carrier, but she ignored the hits and returned fire with 3 rounds. The third fighter was smarter, having taken cover and laying down suppressive fire so she couldn't advance or retreat while the prisoners were still evacuating behind her. She was pinned with limited ammunition and no cover when she heard it, the distinctive roar of an A-10 aircraft's engines as the close air support had arrived early. Adeline keyed her radio, informing the lead pilot that civilians were clear and requesting they light up the main building at danger close proximity to her position.
Stay with me.
The acknowledgement was followed by the announcement of guns firing, and the A-10's rotary cannon opened fire, a 7-barrel system that fired thousands of rounds per minute of 30mm depleted uranium rounds. The sound was unlike anything else in warfare, a deep vibration that resonated through your entire body as the main compound building simply disintegrated under the onslaught, and the third fighter who had Adeline pinned was caught in the edge of the gun run and ceased to exist. The main building was destroyed and she marked for missiles using her laser designator, aiming it at the communications building where intelligence indicated the high-value target had his command center. 2 missiles streaked in from the aircraft with the first hitting the communications building dead center and the second hitting 2 seconds later, ensuring nothing survived with the explosions being massive as the entire command section of the compound was obliterated. But Adeline wasn't done, as through the smoke and chaos she spotted movement, 5 fighters trying to escape through a rear exit carrying what looked like documents and equipment, with one of them matching the high-value target's description from the mission brief. She couldn't let them escape after everything, so Adeline sprinted after them with M4 up. The fighters saw her coming and opened fire, forcing her to dive behind a burning vehicle as rounds sparked off the metal, then she came up firing. 2 of the escorts went down immediately and the remaining 3 scattered, with 2 running for the tree line and 1, the high-value target, trying to reach a vehicle. Adeline tracked the high-value target through her scope at 50 meters distant, running hard. She controlled her breathing, led him slightly, and fired. He stumbled but kept running due to body armor, so she fired again, aiming lower, and the round caught him in the leg, causing him to go down hard. The two remaining escorts turned back to help him, which was a bad decision as Adeline fired controlled bursts and both went down.
Come on!
She advanced on the high-value target with weapon ready as he was reaching for a pistol when she kicked it away, instructing him not to move in English then Serbian. He stayed down, bleeding from his leg wound, and she secured his hands with zip ties and applied a tourniquet to his leg, as he was worth more alive for intelligence purposes. She then keyed her radio, informing the lead pilot that the high-value target was captured, not killed, and requesting immediate extraction at her position with one prisoner. The acknowledgement stated a helicopter was inbound in 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes felt like an hour as Adeline maintained security over the wounded high-value target while scanning for additional threats. The compound was destroyed and burning, but enemy reinforcements could arrive at any time, and she detected engines as vehicles approached on the mountain road with enemy reinforcements coming. She informed the lead pilot she had enemy vehicles inbound and needed that aircraft now, receiving a 30-second response.
Please breathe, you have
The vehicles were coming fast, 2 technicals with mounted machine guns and maybe 20 fighters total. Adeline had 1 magazine left in her M4 containing 28 rounds. The lead technical rounded the bend and she aimed carefully, placing 10 rounds into the driver and engine block, causing the technical to crash into a tree. The second technical was smarter, stopping at distance with the gunner opening fire with the mounted PKM heavy machine gun, with rounds tearing up the ground around Adeline's position. She grabbed the high-value target and dragged him behind better cover, a concrete bunker that was still partially intact, as rounds hammered into the concrete, chipping away at her protection. She had 18 rounds left against 20 enemy fighters with at least 1 heavy machine gun, making the odds bad, but then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the thump of helicopter rotors. The helicopter came in fast and aggressive with door gunners already engaging, and minigun fire ripped into the technical, shredding it and the fighters around it. The ground unit was instructed to board immediately as they were landing hot, so Adeline grabbed the high-value target, hoisted him up, and ran for the landing helicopter. Enemy fighters were firing from the tree line, but the door gunners were suppressing them with devastating effect. She threw the high-value target aboard, then jumped in herself as the helicopter lifted off with rounds sparking off the armored hull but nothing penetrating. They were airborne, climbing fast, leaving the burning compound and dead. Enemies behind. The crew chief looked at her, covered in rock dust, blood, and cordite residue with uniform shredded but still maintaining security over the prisoner with her last magazine, stating she was bleeding. She noticed the blood seeping through her sleeve and responded they were flesh wounds, that the plate caught most of it, and she was good. He remarked that she had climbed that mountain without equipment, assaulted 30 fighters alone, rescued civilians, and captured the high-value target, stating that wasn't good but legendary. Adeline just nodded, too exhausted to respond, looking out at the mountain she had climbed, the compound she had destroyed, and the impossible mission she had completed after losing her entire team. Her hands were destroyed from the climbing, she had 3 gunshot wounds, all minor and stopped by her plate carrier or just flesh wounds, and she had expended 212 rounds of M4 ammunition, 33 rounds of pistol ammunition, and all 4 grenades. But the mission was complete, the high-value target was captured, and 20 civilians were saved. Her team's deaths had been avenged, and as they flew toward friendly lines, she finally allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. 1 week later, the captured high-value target provided intelligence that led to the arrest of 47 paramilitary leaders and prevented 3 planned massacres. The documents recovered from the compound exposed an entire network of ethnic cleansing operations that stretched across 3 countries. The 20 civilians Adeline rescued testified at war crimes tribunals, and their testimony was instrumental in convicting multiple war criminals, including 2 generals and a political leader who had orchestrated the ethnic cleansing campaigns. Without their testimony, many perpetrators would have escaped justice. Adeline was awarded the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration, for her actions, with the citation detailing her free climb without equipment, solo assault on a fortified compound, civilian rescue under fire, and capture of a high-value target after her entire team had been killed. The ceremony was attended by the families of her fallen teammates, and one mother embraced Adeline, whispering thanks for finishing what they started and making their sacrifice matter. During the press conference that followed, a journalist asked how she found the strength to complete such an impossible mission alone, and Adeline explained that Rangers train for the absolute worst circumstances, including equipment failure, losing teammates, and being outnumbered and outgunned. She stated that what happened on that mountain was bad but not outside the scope of what Rangers prepare for. that her team started the mission and she finished it, because that's what Rangers do. They don't leave missions incomplete and they don't leave their teammates' sacrifice without meaning. Another journalist pressed, noting she went beyond her mission parameters and risked the air strike to save civilians who weren't part of her objective. Adeline replied firmly that Rangers lead the way, which means being first into danger but also upholding the values they represent, that she couldn't call in an air strike that would kill innocent people locked in cages, that her team wouldn't have wanted that either, and they are warriors with a moral compass. She explained that sometimes the hardest part of a mission isn't the fighting but making the right decision when nobody's watching and nobody would know if you took the easier path. She returned to the 75th Ranger Regiment and continued serving, declining offers to move into training roles or staff positions because she wanted to stay operational and keep leading Rangers in combat. The story of her climb, the free solo ascent under fire, the solo assault, the civilian rescue, and the high-value target capture became legendary throughout Special Operations Forces worldwide. 6 months after her mission, Adeline was promoted and given command of her own Ranger Fire team, training them obsessively in mountain warfare, equipment-free operations, and ethical decision-making under pressure. During one mountain training exercise when a team member's climbing rope broke during an ascent, the other Rangers immediately called for rescue and began setting up a complex rope system to reach him, but Adeline watched for 30 seconds then started free climbing the face to reach the stranded Ranger. She reached him in 4 minutes, brought him down safely without any equipment, then gathered her team to explain that Rangers don't wait for perfect conditions or perfect equipment. She told them they train with gear so they're proficient but train without gear so they're capable, that the Ranger was in danger and the fastest way to help him wasn't building a rope system but climbing, so she climbed, because that's what Rangers do, solve problems with whatever resources they have available, including just their training and their bodies. The team member she had rescued, a young private on his first field exercise, later said he was hanging on that wall scared he was going to fall when he looked down and saw the staff sergeant climbing up to him without any equipment, just using her hands and feet, and in that moment understood what it really means to be a Ranger. It's not about the gear or having perfect conditions but about getting the job done no matter what. A small memorial was erected near the helicopter crash site, a stone monument with 5 names of the Rangers who started the mission, and below their names a simple inscription. Adeline visits the memorial whenever she's in the region for training operations, placing her hand on each name and making the same promise every time: your mission was completed, your sacrifice mattered, and you would be proud of how it ended. But the monument that truly honors their sacrifice isn't made of stone but rather of doctrine, training, and mindset, as the lessons from that mission are taught to every Ranger who goes through training. The techniques Adeline used, including free climbing under fire, solo assault tactics, and ethical decision-making under pressure, are now standard components of Ranger training. The story spread beyond special operations to conventional forces, to allied militaries, to militaries worldwide, becoming a case study not just in tactics but in leadership, resilience, and maintaining moral standards under impossible conditions.
Come on!
A year after the mission, Adeline received a letter from one of the civilians she had rescued, a young woman who had been held in those cages for 3 weeks expecting to die. She wrote that Adeline had appeared like an angel of death to their captors and an angel of mercy to them, that they had given up hope and thought they would die in those cages or worse. Then she came from the mountain alone, bleeding, fighting like a demon, and freed them. She wrote that Adeline didn't have to, that she was there to kill their captors not to save them, but she saved them anyway, risking everything to give them their lives back, and her children and husband are alive because of her. The letter concluded stating they will never forget and thanking the Ranger. Adeline kept that letter in her pocket and carried it on every mission. When things got hard, when missions got complicated, when she had to make difficult decisions, she would touch that letter and remember why Rangers do what they do, not for glory or recognition, but because somewhere in the world there are people who need help, who need justice, who need someone willing to climb impossible mountains and fight impossible odds to do what's right. They had left her stranded on a mountain peak at 11,000 feet with no equipment, no team, no support, and enemies closing in from all directions, and she had climbed 2,000 vertical feet of rock face with bleeding hands, eliminated 2 surface-to-air missile sites with precision fire, assaulted a fortified compound with 30 defenders and limited ammunition, rescued 20 civilians while under fire, and captured a war criminal who would have escaped justice, because that's what Rangers do. They adapt, they overcome, they complete the mission no matter what it takes, they do the right thing even when it's harder. They refuse to quit even when quitting would be understandable, and that mountain would remember forever the day one ranger proved that impossible was just another word for mission accepted. The odds didn't matter, the circumstances didn't matter, the obstacles didn't matter. What mattered was the mission, the people who needed help, and the ranger creed that had been beaten into her through years of training. She had led the way up an impossible mountain through an impossible fight to an impossible victory, and in doing so proved what every ranger believes but what that mountain made undeniable. There is no challenge that can't be overcome, no mission that can't be completed, no circumstance that justifies quitting, just training, determination, moral courage, and the absolute refusal to let impossible become reality. Staff Sergeant Adeline Parker had climbed without equipment, fought without support, and won without backup, because Rangers don't need perfect conditions, they just need a mission and the will to complete it, and that will, forged in training, proven in combat, and honored in legacy, is what makes Rangers different. They don't accept impossible, they defeat it one mission, one mountain, one impossible circumstance at a time.